Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
And this one to center field. Denzel Clark on the move back after he started towards home plate. He makes another catch. Back-to-back weeks where he has the electric play of the week, and he's already on the leaderboard for Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia at peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks. It's me, one of your hosts, James. And I'm here with someone who, if you ask his fiance, is also a hell of a catch.
I think it's like that Fail Mary where there's two catches being made at once. Which catch was first? I think it's a little bit of a gray area. But Diaz is back with you once again. We do have a very special guest. He is a replacement ref. Please introduce yourself.
I don't want to be a replacement ref unless do I get to just make up the rules and call a touchdown, an interception, or vice versa? Because if that's the case, I will do it because I am the very special guest, Xavier.
Xavier, it is lovely to have you here. I wanted to say, I don't think it ever has been said out loud. I have this vision in my mind because we specifically call you the very special guest where Diaz and I are just sitting behind a desk and you're luxuriating on this nice plush love chair next to it. That just is the setup that I have had in my mind the entire time we've ever been doing this because of the titles we've given ourselves. This is not about anything. That's how we're set up.
The Roots play Xavier in each time.
Yeah, it's Don Ham. Don Ham, the band leader, is who plays us in. But I don't know what Dom Ham's band is. I will ask him, and we can add that in later on. What we can add right now, though, are the things that are making memories for all of us. Anyone want to start?
Well, I teased to the both of you that I had a major announcement for making memories this week. I've decided who should be the guy that will make memories for me for hopefully the next decade. It's the guy that the Sixers need to draft at number 3. And, of course, I can't just say the name. I need to build up to a little bit. So, pre-draft, everybody, consensus, no doubt about it. It's Flag 1, it's Harper 2, and it's Ace Bailey 3. And when we got the pick at 3, in my head, I was just like, okay, cool, neat. We're going to get Ace Bailey. Here's the thing about Ace Bailey. I don't think he's an NBA-level player. I think he is the wing version of Jahlil Okafor. I think he has an outdated skill set that if it were the late 90s, I think it would be pretty cool. He's a tall guy. He can get to his spots. He can get his shot off on anybody. The problem is that he doesn't make his shot. And that's an important part of basketball. I don't know if you two knew that. I don't know if, dear listener, I don't know if you knew that. The ball going in the hoop is a pretty important part of this game.
You don't get points for attempts. Is this the first time you guys have had the 3 pick and use it? I know you had the 1, you trade up to 1 for Fultz. Is this the first time you guys have used the 3 picks since Jahlil Okafor?
Since Okafor, yes. The year prior was Embiid. So there's a very wide range of outcomes here.
Yeah, inside you there are 2 wolves.
I don't know if you saw Sam Vecini put out his massive draft guide for The Athletic earlier. It's 200 pages, so definitely worth looking at if you have an Athletic subscription. But he said that Ace Bailey feels a bit like a house of cards to him. He lists all the things he has to improve. If he does, he would become the second best player in the class. If he doesn't, he wouldn't want to touch him in the top 5. So that it's a super boomer bust pick, as much as you could possibly have.
There's just too many red flags because if you look at his high school tape, it's a lot of not being able to get past people and rising up and taking jump shots. And you look at his college tape, the defenders are a little bigger, and he has to do mostly the same thing. Can't really get to the rim. Shoots a little worse. There's a pattern here, and once he's going against NBA-level competition, I just don't see it getting better. And there's also the quote of oh, to you it's a bad shot, but I make it. It's like, you really don't. You really didn't, and you really don't. So Ace Bailey is out the window. The player who if you put a gun to my head and it was Diaz, who's going to be the next best player after Flag and Dylan Harper?
I'll ask you that without putting a gun to your head. Like, we
Please,
can ask
no
that
guns.
peacefully.
No guns. We can ask it peacefully. We can talk it out. If I had to bet on who has the highest floor, who would I be most certain is going to be, at the very least, an NBA level rotation player, good, solid contributor? I think it's Con Knipple. I think the only reason why people are afraid to say that it's Con Knipple is because his name is Con Knipple and he's a goofy looking white boy.
They are literally afraid to say Con Knipple.
I understand. I get it. He's a frumpy looking white boy, but dude, he's built like an ox. He might be the best shooter in this class. I think the athleticism concerns are a little overblown. I think he's not a super mobile guy by any means. But like I said, he's strong. I don't think he's going to be able to get moved off his spot. I think he's the best pure shooter. I think there could be some tall Andre Miller to his game. I could see him just being like, hey, I might only be 6'4", but you're 6'2", and you're little as shit, and I'm going to post you up and I'm going to score. I can see a lot of that in his game. But when you're picking at number 3, you're not picking to be safe. You're picking for upside. You're picking for star potential. And I think by far the highest star potential of anybody after those top 2 is Trey Johnson. Trey Johnson's the guy. Trey Johnson did the Ace Bailey thing where he takes tough shots on a bad team, but he actually made his shots, which is why Texas made the NCAA tournament and Rutgers was the worst team in major basketball. There's been a lot said about how toxic that locker room was in Texas, and because of that, there are some poor body language moments throughout the season from Trey Johnson. There's no denying that, but word is from the Combine, as bad as that Ace Bailey quote was, Trey Johnson has been interviewing that well on the other side of it, acknowledging, hey, look, these are the holes in my game. These are the things that I should have done better during my year at Texas. I think he's got everything that you're looking for in a star. And the obvious concern is you already have Maxey, you already have McCain, you want to retain Grimes. The league is quite simply about having the most players that can create their own shot. And if you have the most of those guys on the court, you can fill it out with enough role players around them. I think Trey Johnson is one of those guys that can go get his own shot. I think he doesn't have the creation of a Jared McCain at this point. But if we are keeping an eye to the future, which I do think is important, but also looking at who's the guy that can fit in around Joel Embiid. Trey Johnson was amazing in catch and shoot. And I think he can slide right into that role. I think he's the guy. I'm holding up my horns because I want the Longhorn to come home. There was once a great freshman scorer at Texas who carried them, and his name was Kevin Durant. He turned out pretty good. And now we have another great freshman scorer, averages over 20 a game. His name is Trey Johnson. Just say the name, Trey Johnson. Doesn't Trey Johnson sound like a multi-time All-Star? I think it's a multi-time All-Star name.
If you told me there was a multi-time All-Star named Trey Johnson, you could convince me that I had forgotten a multi-time All-Star named Trey Johnson.
What if we just called him Richard Johnson III, though? Does that sound like an All-Star?
Yes, also it does.
Dick Johnson's. He is Dick Johnson, third of his name.
If you throw a numeral after literally any basketball player, it sounds so real to me.
Half of the reason why I loved Ricky Council IV is because he was the fourth.
Yeah.
By the way, two and 3 are his brothers. 1 is his dad. All I have to say, Trey Johnson is the guy.
I guess where Vicini has those 2 on his rankings list.
I'm not going to guess because I did see. So James, go ahead.
6 and 9.
I mean, that would be very funny, but it is Knepple 3 and Trey Johnson 5.
And he has Ace Bailey,
6th.
Lower. Yeah, right, exactly. Yep. So, I mean, listen, Sam Vicini, I think he knows some ball. I'm sure his long-form description is basically what I laid out. Con Knipple, yes. Safest of anybody after the top 2. Trey Johnson, if you want a fucking star. And I'll also say, not for the Sixers, because I'm just not willing to, fully move on from Embiid. But came in Malawach. I am a big believer in the whole picked up basketball late is still kind of learning this sport thing. I think he's going to be a stud.
No reason why that could be an archetype that appeals to you. Trey Johnson, the next Kevin Durant. You all heard it. I was very nearly the fourth one, speaking of numerals, but I think I'm going to go third this time and throw Xavier in front of the train to go second so I can finish things off with a little game.
I mean, it's going to be quick for me because I've already talked about this in our Discord. But shout out Coco Gauff.
Yeah.
French Open champion.
Yeah.
Fantastic performance. I was on the edge of my seat watching that on my phone, and it was great. It was a great performance. It's one of those things where if you just win one, it kind of feels like it could be just that one off. We've talked about plenty of people who have won one time and that's it. Getting this second and getting it at a different event, it's not just 2 US Opens, it's now a US Open and a French, where it's different surface, different major, and now it feels a little more real that, Coco's finally arrived. So I'm super happy for Coco. And also fuck Aryna Sabalenka, trying to take the wind out of her sails by claiming that Coco wasn't good and that she only won because the weather was bad and Aryna herself played bad and anyone could have beaten Coco, especially fucking Iga Swiatek if Iga had played her in the most petty sore loser shit I've ever seen, which unfortunately is very common for Aryna Sabalenka and not fitting of someone who is as talented as she is. So I would say I hope that, she kind of removes that from her game, but she's 27 years old at this point, which is kind of ancient for tennis standards, sadly enough, which makes me feel old. But at this point, if you're still a sore loser, you're gonna still be a sore loser. So I hope she loses every single tournament that she plays in because she can't respect other people winning.
I think once you're old enough to if you were a musician and killed yourself, as some have done, you would have a large enough body of work to inspire mythology. You've become enough of an adult that this is who you are. Okay, cool. You suck, and it's great when you lose.
I mean, isn't it very specifically the 27 club anyway?
Yes, precisely. Precisely. Yeah. She has hit that barrier this year. If this is how you're going to walk off of a loss that you could have taken gracefully, cool. Nice to meet you. Nice to know who you are. Get wrecked.
Well, speaking of get wrecked, James, are you going to give us a game that is going to make me feel wrecked?
I don't think so. I think this is a fun game. Not a very long one. This is going to be called Contractual Obli-Guy-tions. And the way it works, I have 7 sentences that I'm going to read out to you all. And they are about goofy things in athlete contracts. Some of them are incentives. Some of them are just little clauses. Some of them are just signing bonus things, but they are all real things that have been in athlete contracts except for one. And I want you to figure out which of these 7 is not actually in an athlete's contract. Contractual Obli-Guy-tions. Are the 2 of you ready to play?
James, I gotta say, I know you and I listen to My Brother and Me. This sounds oddly similar to the was it in the rider or not live show quiz game.
I mean, trivia is trivia. There's a good format to this stuff. If you think you can come up with one fake thing, it's pretty good. It could be like several shows that they play on the macros. It could be like several games that we've already had in Who Wants to Be a Guy-Millionaire. I'm
very excited for this. I'm very excited for the fact that 6 of them will be real.
6 of these are real contractual language for athletes. And I'm going to go in roughly chronological order. I think I got these all in the correct order. First up, Raleigh Fingers in 1973 included a yearly stipend for mustache wax from the Oakland A's to the tune of $100, which is equivalent to about $720 today. That's one. Number 2, Bill Walton and the San Diego Clippers negotiated for him to get 8 tickets to each of 7 sold-out Bruce Springsteen shows at Sports Arena. Sports Arena being the name of the sports arena they had there, just to clarify.
Great, love it.
Number 3, let's go to the world of football. Stefan Schwartz, Swedish footballer, signed with Mackem Scum, Sunderland, in 1999. And at the time, he was so enthusiastic about space tourism that the team had to introduce a no space travel line in his contract. That's 3. You are guaranteed that 2 of the 3 we've said so far, at minimum, are real. Number 4, Jared Allen's trade to the Minnesota Vikings was quickly followed by a 6-year contract, the richest ever at the time for a defensive player, and it included a $15,500,069 signing bonus.
That sounds like something Jared Allen would do.
Number 5, Luke Bonner's brother Matt, who was then a member of the Spurs, had added for the 2010-2011 contract a line in which if his free throw percentage, field goal percentage, and three-point percentage added up in total to 169 would be awarded $100,000 as an incentive. Number 6, Orioles legend and former Texas Rangers second baseman Rougned Odor at one point signed a 6-year extension to stay in Arlington that included 2 horses. And finally, number 7, ahead of the 2025 NFL season, Derrick Henry signed an extension with the Baltimore Ravens that included a clause wherein if he became the first ever player to record a second 2,000-yard season, it would trigger a cameo role for him in an Adam Sandler movie. Those are your 7. Feel free to ask me to repeat some details.
I think I have my guess already. Just knowing you, James, I think you would make up the one that sounded the most realistic and not insane. So I'm going to say the Raleigh Fingers mustache wax one is the fake one.
Okay. Diaz, what do you say to Raleigh Fingers mustache wax?
See, along the same logic as Xavier, I was thinking like the Bill Walton thing. I was like, oh, that's like right up his lane. So like that actually sounds like it might be the one. So I'm between that and the Matt Bonner one.
So Bill Walton and the San Diego Clippers negotiated for him to get 56 total tickets, 8 tickets to 7 sold-out shows. Here's the thing. He didn't even get the tickets themselves because all he asked for was the right to get to buy them at face value and not have to buy them from scalpers. Like, he was still fully willing to put down for 56 tickets to Bruce Springsteen's show. He just wanted to pay face value. So the 1970s A's, Raleigh Fingers, is one of the ones who starts growing a mustache along with a lot of other players, kind of like against the trend. It's like the start of mustaches in baseball. And Charlie Finley realizes it's so valuable that he one season starts offering like $300 bonuses to players that start having mustaches. And then Raleigh Fingers does indeed decide, okay, well then when we sign my next one, I'm going to include that fucking wax in there, man. So both those are wrong. The other one you guessed was Matt Bonner. That was in there. He got to 157, 464 from the field, 457 from 3, 744 from the free throw line. Very, very close. He did not trigger that. Want to try again for any of the remaining ones? At this point, you've got Stefan Schwartz signing with Scumderland, and then not being allowed to travel to space. You've got the Jared Allen Minnesota Vikings 69 signing bonus. You've got Orioles legend and Texas Rangers second baseman Rougned Odor getting 2 horses in a contract, and you've got Derrick Henry signing an extension that includes a Adam Sandler clause.
I'll say the Derrick Henry one is fake.
I feel like, because like I know that he did have this conversation with Adam Sandler, but like I guess it just feels like it's not something the Ravens would be able to put into a contract. So I agree with Xavier.
You are correct. This is a real thing that has now been promised to Derrick Henry through Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick had Derrick Henry on and has connections with Adam Sandler. Derrick Henry said, I want to be in an Adam Sandler film. And Adam Sandler communicated through Dan Patrick, okay, get a second 2,000-yard season, something he came within 80 yards of doing last year. Then he will get to do it. But it is not in his contract. Every single one of these 7 statements has been quote-unquote true at the very least. The only thing that was not true is that Derrick Henry's is not language with the Ravens. They can't promise that. They don't know Adam Sandler. Thank you for playing Contractual Obli-Guy-tions. It was all a trick, and I got you. But you guys did very well on the rebound.
I'll take it. Boardman gets paid.
So, with that, we come to our guy this week. I've got our game-breaking guy, and I think is appropriate. We start with the game, because it's not one of the super common ones, but it is one that I think, at least in some way, everyone enjoys to some extent. Everyone kind of gets a rush from track and field. Now, you might only see it at the Olympics. And for the record, I'm not saying no one does. The average fan is probably only going to see it there. But it is something that always lands because it is very primal. They are some of the most basic sports. I can run faster than you. I can throw this further than you. I can jump further than you. All of those just kind of fundamental athletic questions. And this is why I was kind of surprised as I started diving in this week to find that the high jump is a lot more modern than that. The high jump is actually roughly 18th century, very earliest records of a similar kind of competition held in some Celtic games. And then in the 19th century is when it starts to codify as a measured and tracked sport, starting in like Scotland and then spreading from England to the rest of the world. And for about a century, the high jump is one of the most tinkered with disciplines in track and field, because unlike how one runs, there is a way to run very fast. There is typically a way to throw things very far. There's a way to jump very far. I know we've discussed the somersault recently, but no one's doing that and breaking their neck. The high jump had a lot of different approaches for a while, and it gave it, up until the mid-1960s, a real, like, stylistic richness. We've kind of talked about individual sports having that recently. Then, all of a sudden, in 1968, progress stunted to a halt. Not for a lack of innovative minds in the space of the time, but because someone figured out the ideal answer to the question, how do you jump as high as you can? And with that, we introduce our guy this week, Dick Fosbury. So Richard Douglas Fosbury hails from Portland, born March 6, 1947, and he is taking an interest in the sport at an interesting time. For years, everyone jumped in one way at the beginning of the high jump. But since the turn of the century, a couple different approaches have been developed, and there have been, like we said, a lot of those stylistic differences. Dick is bad at all of them. By the time he is a 16-year-old in high school, like, he simply cannot compete using the current best meta. He's often failing to get over just like the 5-foot qualifying height for most meets. And he starts to experiment in the styles that we have. So let's talk for a moment about high jump style. You have to jump off only 1 foot. That has always been a rule. And besides that, it's get over by any means necessary. For some periods of the sport, there have been rules about, like, your feet have to go first. And that defined a lot of the early approach, which was something called the scissors method, where you run up to the bar with these scissors, approaching from about a 45-degree angle. You jump and you kind of flutter your legs over one at a time. It's pretty inefficient. You almost look like you're sitting on the bar the whole time. So it's really about how high you can get your crotch up and then just flick those legs one at a time over. So in this upright variation of it, called the Eastern Cutoff. It is the same approach, but there is a rotation of your trunk midway through the air towards the bar, so that you are kind of pulling the second leg over. So if you can get an initial arc on your first leg still fluttering over at this time, you are still at least able to kind of ride the momentum of the wave of your jump a little bit better. It's called the Eastern Cutoff because it's being developed over in the eastern coast of the United States, whereas the Western Roll is being developed over on the West Coast, near Stanford. And this is where we're finally approaching the bar with the leg that is going to jump off versus jumping with the leg further out from the bar. You're still going at this essentially with your belly facing the bar the full time. Like, you're still going to arc over it as if you were launching from a diving board facing the water. But with this, they are now intentionally trying to do, just like it says, a roll, trying to keep themselves as sort of one flexible line segment that rotates, not unlike a single line going down the shaft of a screw over this bar and landing then in a 3-point stance. That's something important. All of these so far, the scissors method, the Eastern Cutoff, and the Western Roll, have a very specific landing you have to pull off, because there's typically like sawdust or wood chips as you're landing. And then you start to move into stuff where that becomes a potential problem. The technique that had kind of followed after the Eastern Cutoff and the Western Roll is the straddle technique, which hits the scene in about the 1950s. And once it is used for the high jump in 1956, it's the first time that anyone has ever hit 7 feet. It is a big barrier breaker for high jump. You are jumping so that you are face down with your legs as you go around it. It is taking a combination of the scissors method and what had been done with the Western Roll, when you're still now jumping with the opposite foot as you were originally with the Eastern Cutoff and scissors. But you were then, after that, rolling your body with your legs one after the other, flicking them up towards the sky rather than having to flick them towards yourself with abdominal strength in the same way. And just rolling over, straddling for a moment the pole as you go over. This is admittedly a little difficult to talk about in an audio medium. I understand that. In the description, we will post a video of many different ways, but essentially there's one thing that unites all of these, and that's getting over and being able to land safely. And the straddle makes that very difficult because it is a very complex motion. It is guaranteed to give you the most height if you are a high jumper that can get good at it. It is also much harder to do than the other ones. And after Dick has failed at the scissor method, at the Eastern Cutoff, at the Western Roll, at the straddle, there is no conventional method left for him. But one other thing about the conventions of high jump is changing to give Dick Fosbury a chance. And that is no longer do you have to deal with sawdust or wood chips. All of a sudden, we are moving in the early 60s to the age of foam mats.
Love landing on something that is better to not kill yourself on.
Foam seems better than wood chips. A little less natural, maybe, but much safer.
Yeah, also importantly, it is able to be elevated compared to those other two. You don't have to fall as far. They have like them, a couple feet up, so that when you come down, you're landing more quickly. You don't have as much time to fall. It is an immense improvement for the safety of high jump, which means you can get a little bit more risky. And that's what Dick Fosbury decides to do. Dick Fosbury is implored by his coaches to take this ever more complex way of going over the pole face first. And Dick Fosbury says, you're all wrong. It's time to go backwards. If you have ever watched high jump in the past half century, you have seen a form of Dick Fosbury's jump. You approach the high jump with a roughly J-shaped path, starting at an angle about 45 degrees, much like the scissor method, and then curving off there at the end. And then as you jump, with the foot that is closest to the bar, you angle your back over the bar. You get up to a sharp angled arch and then pull the rest of your body over the bar. And by doing this, once upon a time, I was a very smart science student in school. And then I switched to art school in college, and I don't know how to explain a lot of physics stuff that I probably could have once upon a time. I could tell you, what a center of gravity is. It says it all in their name. It is the point at which all of your mass at any point in motion is concentrated. A smart physicist can tell you how this happens. A smart kinesiologist maybe can. I could not begin to explain to you why. What I can tell you is, however, this jump, this flop over the bar manages to do it, it does get your center of gravity lower than any other possible one, keeping it around your head, the top of your chest, your feet. And by going over in this particular manner, it just makes it easier to get it beyond the bar than any other jump style. And this flop becomes known as, thanks to Dick saying it to local reporters in high school, the Fosbury flop.
It's a great name. It's such a good name.
And I mean, I'm certainly not a physicist, but I'm just trying to, in my head, make it make sense. And it's if the part of your body that is already highest gets over first, I feel like you're allowing more time for the lower parts of your body to then get higher with the momentum. I feel like
all right, that's it. We have to get a mechanical engineer on the podcast to explain how this works.
When we come to the end of this season and eventually we discuss Dick Fosbury's candidates, I will try and see if I can get a full explanation to go through this. I will have that ready. I promise you that. I couldn't understand it today. I'll be honest. I really tried to wrap my head around it. And it's difficult for everyone to wrap their heads around because all of a sudden Dick Fosbury becomes one of the best high school high jumpers that there is. He is now all of a sudden his junior year breaking the school record of 6'3". That is about 1.91 meters. Going to throw both measurements at you at times. And then as a senior, he and his North Medford High Black Tornado teammates.
That's a good name.
It's so fucking good. They win the boys state track and field state title. And he ends up placing second in the state the 6'5.5" high jump, 1.969 meters. Nice. Like, after refusing to give in to all of his coach's exhortations to just like fit into a box, Dick Fosbury did his own thing and all of a sudden was like one of the top recruits going into the college cycle. And that means he is going to end up in Corvallis, baby, Oregon State University. Go Beavs. We have got the Fosbury flop arriving there. But just as it was in high school, these coaches don't know what they're dealing with because now they want to put Dick in a box yet again. They want to figure out how to make him fit into just the mold that they see until all of a sudden OSU coach Benny Wagner watches him do his first sophomore meet where he hits a 6'10" mark, 2.08 meters. He not only relents, he wants the rest of the team to figure out how to also now do this flop. He sees him do his first varsity meet and changes the entire strategy of his track and field athletic program to teach everyone to jump the exact same way as Fosbury. And that's maybe the one downside to the Fosbury flop, is as soon as it comes, it does break the game by making it clear, oh, this is the only way we can compete at this anymore.
You know, it's rarely the person who comes up with the new meta who benefits from it the most.
Well, and he won't be the last to benefit from it, but he reaps the benefits of this, absolutely. 66 is his freshman year, 67 is his sophomore year. By 1968, as a junior, he has taken the world by storm. Newspapers all over the country giving him full photo spreads because it is necessary to them to explain this Fosbury flop to anyone who's heard it. Because what are you saying? He goes over the bar backwards? Yes, that is exactly it. And so you can see him all over the country in newspapers as we are preparing for a very big year. For one, he is going to be on the corner of track and field news because he wins two big meets. One, the 1968 NCAA title, where he sets an NCAA record of 7 feet and 2.5 inches. And then the U.S. Olympic trials is the other one that he dominates, placing first. Except that doesn't guarantee him a spot this year because the U.S. is particularly worried about the altitude for Mexico City. And so their whole qualifying process for 1968 is different than it will be at any other time in Olympic history. So because of their concern regarding the altitude, the United States decides to have a second round of trials, essentially, for some of the finalists from the first one in Lake Tahoe, the closest they have like a facility that can approximate that altitude. And towards the end of it, it's between him, veteran Ed Carruthers, and a pair of high schoolers, Reynaldo Brown and John Hartfield. But he does just enough to punch his ticket to south of the border to represent the United States in October after making one of the last jumps and seeing the two high schoolers fail to make their final jump.
As a wise man once said, fuck them kids.
Fuck them kids. Glad everyone's on the same page with that.
For the record, like, when Olympics, all this worrying about like whether the U.S. is going to be able to manage, they set up so many fucking records. They just drop like flies during the time. Bob Beamon shatters the long jump by nearly 2 feet. One of the most impressive athletic performances of all time. Jim Hines, the first sub-10 100 meter, 9.9. Tommy Smith runs 200 meter in the first ever sub-20 time, 19.8. And just to mention, like, some guys, Peter Norman is there along with Smith and teammate John Carlos on the podium. And Abibi Bakila unsuccessfully tries to three-peat in marathon. But besides maybe the Beamon long jump, nothing is more seismic than what happens with the high jump.
It's too bad that no one remembers anything that happened at those Olympics other than Tommy Smith and John Carlos.
I get why that's the biggest one. It is kind of impressive how much other stuff is going on the whole time. So Fosbury coming into this, he's gotten some press. Like, the Fosbury flop is known. But then he comes out, he storms to first in the qualifyings, landing all the way at 2.14 meters to get started. This is already the biggest stage ever for his style. And after we reach the finals, he stays right up at the top of the pack. Eventually we get to a final of him, Ed Carruthers, and Soviet Valery Skvortsov, who is taking up the mantle of a fellow Soviet and the current world record holder, Valery Brunel. All of them eventually get past the new Olympic record of 2.2. Fosbury clears 2.22, after which Skvortsov falls. Carruthers finally clears. They go up to the next one. Fosbury hits the bar on his first, hits the bar on his second try. On the third try at 2.23 meters, Fosbury clears it, setting yet another Olympic record for the third straight height. and Carruthers fails on all three. Dick Fosbury wins the gold. As he's winning, the marathon is also going on, and his teammate, Kenny Moore, sees him like make that last 2.23 jump over it, and like he sees Fosbury do a fist pump while he's still running. Moore does a dance for him as he's like encircling the field, and Fosbury's just going crazy. Fosbury does decide to take a couple shots at the world record, but 2.23 is good enough. He gets his Olympic medal. He also put up a fist on the podium after the Carlos Smith one. I couldn't find a photo of it. He said in an NPR interview, and I can believe that people would have been trying to avoid more potential photos of that. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But he's there with the Olympic movement for human rights, definitely. He was an avid vocal supporter of them in what ends up being his final Olympic competition ever. I did not realize necessarily going into this. This is the end of Fosbury's Olympic career. He goes back to school for his senior year, and he does repeat as the NCAA champ for, what's the year after 1968?
1969.
Yeah, 1969.
1969, yes, thank you very much. Before he goes off to become an engineer, a civil engineer. While he has a meager Olympic career, the flop has a much longer one. And there's one other really big contributing factor for that, one other person that contributes to it. So I do want to take just a second to talk about Debbie Brill. Debbie Brill was born in British Columbia, just about 6 years, almost to the day, after Fosbury. She, as a kid, has her dad own this farm, and he sets up a jumping pit. So she starts jumping all the time into like foam blocks. And the way she describes it, like instinctually, she also just started jumping a certain way when trying to jump as high as possible, which was in a manner almost identical to the Fosbury flop. But when she starts competing, first at a provincial scale at 13 years old in 1966, and then all the way up to her first international competition in 1968, her teammates, they're all raving about the Brill Bend. The Brill Bend is how they're referring to her jump. And then, just as she's becoming an international athlete, the 1968 Olympics happen. And the flop is solidified as what this is. And this truly seems to be completely independent of one another. There's just two very good high jump athletes coming to the same conclusion at almost the exact same time. But he just gets to a big televised event first. And like also, yeah, he's a man. And if they were both up against one another in the Olympics, he might also get the edge for that reason. But if not for him, the Brill Bend probably would have caught on because she sets the Canadian record in 1969. Nice. She wins gold at the 71 and 72 Commonwealth and Pan Am Games, respectively. And ahead of the 72 Munich Games is like considered a contender. And then when the Munich massacre happens, Debbie Brill actually petitions to have the games canceled entirely. Just thinking like, it is ridiculous that we would continue on with this. And when they resume, it just like leads a bad taste in her mouth. And so she retires from jumping entirely for a couple of years. But she is kind of lured out of retirement. I think not in any small part because the next Olympics does take place in Canada, 1976 Montreal. She does come back on home soil. She fails to clear the opening height entirely and catches a lot of flack for it in the aftermath of this, seemingly kind of like laughing it off with the sideline reporter. A lot of people see it as her not taking it seriously. Like, hey, you were one of the like really favored contenders coming into this and you're laughing about not getting past the first height. And it was her after a period of big disillusionment of the sport, just kind of realizing, okay, the worst thing has happened. And look at me, I'm still alive. That's how she kind of refers to that laughing. Don't worry. She's got a chance still. She's still the number one rated female jumper as we head into the next Olympics, the 1980 Summer Olympics. She's not American, but Canada does also participate in the boycott. So she never makes it back to the Olympics. She has a bunch of gold still. She's very like a notable Canadian athlete. She was awarded the Order of Canada in 1983. And I just think is like very much worth mentioning here for a moment as truly the co-inventor, at the same time, parallel inventions of the Brill Bend and the Fosbury flop. All respect to her. It is called the Fosbury flop. So we are now going to sum up the rest of Dick Fosbury because neither of them have a huge Olympic career, but the flop and the credit that Fosbury gets for it absolutely has an enormous Olympic career. It is not universal immediately. It's side by side with the straddle for a few years. But by 1972, you've already got 28 out of 40 competitors in the high jump flopping. And no one since 1976 has medaled without using the flop approach at the Olympics. It is not just because it gets you potentially the highest if you could do it. You know, there are some people who, if they work their ass off, like the top high jumpers could probably still compete very well with the straddle. But the other thing, it is now what is being taught at the lower levels, because like it was for Dick initially, it's a much easier method to do than the straddle.
It's like the two-handed bowling. It's easier for kids to get the spin on it than, you know, trying to do it one-handed.
This is the safer way to approach it, but we couldn't do that until the foam mats. And now that everyone trains on foam mats, some higher competitions will still use that, but might also have like a hard rubber for other jumping events. Not the high jump, because that is one where you can snap your neck and die forever. But like, it is just the industry standard now, and it coming up at the same time as Dick not being able to do anything else has just embedded it into the sport. There are still a couple places where people will do straddle or the Eastern cutoff or the Western roll, and that's in places where they can't afford foam mats. Like, there's a lot of African Federation athletics teams that, because the fields they have access to are essentially dirt fields and they're jumping onto that rather than any kind of soft surface, they still need those landings. They still need those like 3-point landings to have a better protection from injury. It is just, very important that Dick Fosbury has a connection to the equipment of foam, and for us to not take for granted what like having a soft surface for athletes to land on means.
So we need to find out who invented the foam mat and add them to the Hall of Guy, just like Chris Matthews' agent.
I'm happy to introduce them as like a rider item on the bill for Dick Fosbury getting in, but I am still definitely focusing on Dick Fosbury.
It is a literal builder's category. They built the foam mat.
So just a little bit more about like Fosbury the person. Similar to Brill, he is a pretty outspoken guy. First, he puts his fist up in 1968. The next year at Oregon State University, this is much more well documented, there is a black football player, Fred Milton, who is going to get cut from the team due to having a goatee and a facial hair rule that the coach decided to implement during that time. He protests this and eventually leads to a walkout for the football team because, very importantly, Fred Milton and the rest of the black players do not feel respected here in Corvallis, Oregon. Not entirely wrong for that. And this like spreads throughout the school's athletic departments to other teams. And Dick at this point is an Olympic gold medalist. Like, he is seen as a leader in this school's athletic, and he stands firmly and speaks firmly in support of Fred Milton. This inspires like a lot of change in Corvallis, to their credit. This is when they start like setting up individual distinct culture centers on the campus to try and make it easier for individuals that do not necessarily fit the look of the people living around Corvallis, Oregon, to have more social and cultural gathering sites. Eventually, Dick does make a little bit of a foray into politics, as many of these guys often do. He runs as a Democrat, which I feel like we very rarely get. And they still kind of suck, but man, they suck a lot less than the other guys. That is for the Idaho State House of Representatives, by the way, where he had moved in 1977, Idaho. That is where he lived for most of the rest of his life as a civil engineer. I should mention that is where the rest of his life was spent. He does eventually get diagnosed with stage 1 lymphoma in 2008, but he manages to fight that off. He gets it done that time, and he gets 15 more years until there was a recurrence of the lymphoma in 2023 that this time does unfortunately claim his life. As of just a couple years ago, he is no longer with us. But the flop isn't just with us, it is the entire basis of the high jump sport. And Dick Fosbury is, as such, the guy with more fingerprints on this sport than maybe anyone else. And so for that reason, I think he should make the leap and flop into the Hall of Guy this season.
The flop would make for a good plaque. I can already see it now.
Just an absolutely iconic move. And like anybody who's ever participated in track and field, the first day or the first 2 days, they're just like, hey, you guys are going to do everything. And it's incredible just how innate it has become, because I wasn't very good at the high jump, but you bet your ass I did a Fosbury flop when I went up and tried to do it. It is.
What was your highest height? Do you remember?
Dude, probably like maybe like 5 feet. Like, not great.
I mean, hey, remember that's probably still 75th percentile human wide.
I would have, yeah. It's hard to remember. I do remember my 100 meter, excuse me, was came in at a 12.6, was the best I ever ran.
Well, that is the end of Fosbury's run. Not just because he died, RIP, but because that is all we have to say about him this time. With that, we do have a couple of things to say. Mostly it's just gratitude. We want to express that gratitude to producer Craig and the coders behind him, to our musical director Don Ham for that lovely theme music. I want to express gratitude to the two gentlemen joining me on this show, but most of all, we want to thank you, dear listeners, for listening to the show once again. We will be back with guy number 6 of the Game-Breaking Guys next week. But until then, if you want to keep up with us in any capacity, you can find everything related to this show at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. Do we have anything else on the way out, my friends?
I love the Wemby picture of him in a Shaolin temple in China.
Oh my god, it's so good. I do not deserve Victor Wembanyama to play for the same team as Tim Duncan. It is like my cup runneth over for exactly one team, and it is the fucking San Antonio Spurs.
See, KD, his preferred landing spot is the Spurs.
They don't need him.
I
wouldn't do that if I was San Antonio.
Awesome. Yeah, I probably wouldn't also, but if he comes, awesome, cool, whatever. He will get to play next to the most interesting basketball player ever, Victor Wembanyama. Cast him in the Ballerina 2. Victor Wembanyama co-starring in the Ballerina 2 as some kind of Shaolin monk. That's enough movie theorizing for now. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, I've been one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz. And did you guys hear about the chameleon? He listened to our podcast. He had some bad thoughts, but he did want to diss guys.
Yo, Diaz.
Wow, festive.
You know why I have this on? Because the baby puked on my first shirt today. So instead, I'm wearing a tank top that can get puked on easily and I wouldn't care about. But I had internal work calls, so I couldn't just wear the tank top. So I put this on the outside, so tank top can get destroyed. This covers it, and I got nothing but compliments at work today. So, this might be the play. Wear something that can get destroyed on underneath, and then something fun on the outside.
An overshirt does sound like a move. And dude, you can probably get a whole bunch of Hawaiian shirts for $5.
Well, I mean, this one was $70, but I could probably get one for cheaper.
Yeah, let's get the budget, the in bulk, the Costco version.